I walked into my own living room and realized they weren't waiting to talk. They were waiting to rule. When my daughter told me to sit down, I understood they'd already chosen my replacement. Tuesday is usually noisy. Plates, homework, the TV too loud, somebody asking me to fix something I haven't even seen yet. I came home with dust in my hair and my shoulders locked from hauling rebar all day. The kind of tiredness that makes your keys feel heavy. I pushed through the front door expecting normal. What I got was staged. My living room furniture had been pulled into a semicircle like a cheap courtroom. My wife, Amanda Reynolds, sat dead center on the couch. Back straight, hands folded, face set like she'd practiced it in the mirror. Sophie, 16, sat to her right, eyes down. Emma, 14, sat to her left, jaw tight, staring at a spot on the carpet like it was safer than looking at me. And my mother, Carol Reynolds, was in my recliner, not perched on the edge, planted, legs crossed, remote in her hand like it came with her name on it. Brian leaned against the mantel. My older brother. Clean shirt, clean hands, relaxed posture. That smug comfort of a man who doesn't feel like a guest. I stopped just inside the doorway, boots on the mat, lunchbox still in my hand. "Hey," I said. My voice came out flat. Nobody returned it like normal. Nobody asked about my day. Nobody moved. Amanda tilted her chin, the way she does when she's about to correct a stranger. "We need to talk." I looked at my mother in my chair. "Why are you in my—" Carol cut in. "Don't start." Brian smiled without showing teeth. "Let's keep it calm, all right?" That's when I saw it. The shared script. They practiced patience. The way their faces held steady like they'd already heard every version of me in rehearsal. Emma's voice was small but sharp. "Sit down." I stared at her. My youngest is telling me where to put my body in my own house. Sophie finally looked up, and the look wasn't hate. Worse, it was approval, like she was proud of herself for saying what she'd been coached to say. "You're not in charge anymore," she said. The words hit the room and didn't bounce. They landed. I set my lunchbox down on the entry table slowly. Not because I was calm, because I could feel the heat rising, and I knew exactly what they wanted. They wanted me to be loud. They wanted to scare me scary. They wanted a story they could repeat later with wide eyes. Amanda watched me like a prosecutor watches a defendant. "Your temper." "My temper," I said, controlled. "You rearranged the living room to tell me I'm not in charge, and you're leading with my temper?" Carol shook her head like I was proving her right. "We're worried about the girls." Brian pushed off the mantel like he owned the floor. "We think it'd be best if I helped out more around here." Helped out. Amanda didn't even glance at him when she said it, like the decision was bigger than any one person. "The girls need stability, a stronger presence." I looked from her to Brian, then to my daughters, who wouldn't meet my eyes long enough to flinch. "A stronger presence," I repeated. Brian's shoulders lifted in a humble little shrug. "They just need a man they can count on." That's when I understood the whole shape of it. Not a talk, not a concern, a transfer of power, a soft coup in my own living room. I didn't sit. I stood there with my work stiff back and my hands empty and my name being sanded down into something they could step over. And for the first time in my life, I realized my home wasn't a home in their minds. It was a courtroom, and I was already sentenced. I left without raising my voice. That's the part nobody in that living room expected. I didn't slam doors, didn't point, didn't plead. I grabbed my keys, walked out like I'd forgotten something in the truck, and let the cold air hit my face hard enough to keep me steady, because I could feel it, how they were setting the trap. Every word they threw at me had a handle on it. Every sentence was bait. Temper, control, instability. They wanted a reaction they could replay later with worried faces. I wasn't giving them that. Tom Walker lived 10 minutes away in a plain ranch house with a single-car garage and a driveway that always had oil stains like a badge of honesty. He answered the door in sweatpants and an old flannel, squinting like he already knew why I was there. "You look like you just found a body," he said. "Got beer?" I asked. He stepped aside. "Yeah, come in." His kitchen smelled like coffee and motor oil. Tom had built his life the same way I built mine, one hard week stacked on the next. We'd met when I was coming apart after my first divorce, and he'd watched me crawl back into myself, then into a business, then into this house I was apparently no longer in charge of. He cracked 2 beers without asking questions and slid one across the table. I took a pull and stared at the wood grain like it could rearrange my thoughts. "They staged it," I said. "Like a hearing." The furniture moved. Everybody was sitting like they had assigned seats. Tom didn't laugh. He didn't make a joke. He waited. "My mother was in my recliner," I continued. "Brian was leaning on the mantel like he pays the mortgage. My girls—" I stopped for half a second. "My girls told me to sit down." Tom's jaw worked once, like he was chewing something bitter. "And Sophie says I'm not in charge anymore," I added. "Now we need to talk. Now we're scared." Just like it was a fact. Tom's eyes drifted to the beer in his hand and then back to me. "What did Amanda say?" "She talked about my temper, about stability, about a stronger presence." I let that sit for a second. "Then Brian says he should help out more." Tom's face changed a fraction. Not surprising. Not confusion. Recognition. I watched it happen and felt something tighten in my chest. "What?" He blinked slowly. "Nothing." I leaned forward, voice still level. "Tom." He exhaled through his nose like he was deciding whether to step onto a nail. "Man." "What?" I said again, quieter this time. Tom's fingers tapped once on the bottle. I didn't want to be the one to say it. I didn't speak. I just looked at him, because a real friend doesn't do the soft dance. He either tells you or he lies to you. Tom looked away for a second like he hated the angle of the truth. Then he looked back at me, eyes steady now. "I saw Amanda and Brian downtown," he said. My face didn't move, but I felt my stomach drop like an elevator cable snapped. "When?" I asked. "A few weeks ago. Outside that new place on Main, the one with the patio." He swallowed. "They weren't just talking." I set my beer down carefully. Not gentle. Deliberate. Tom held my gaze. Close enough that it wasn't a misunderstanding. The kitchen went quiet in a way that makes the fridge hum sound loud. I nodded once, like I was receiving a job site report, like it was just information, but my hands went cold. "You sure?" I asked even though I already knew. Tom didn't flinch. "I'm sure." The word sat there between us, ugly and plain and final. Fair. It wasn't a suspicion anymore. It wasn't a gut feeling I could argue with at 3 in the morning. It wasn't me being paranoid or controlling. It was a fact. A weight. And facts don't care about how calm you are. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling for a second, breathing through my nose. Tom waited like a man who understands that some news has to sink in before you can stand up again. When I looked back at him, my voice was even. "Why didn't you tell me?" His expression tightened. "Because I didn't want to be wrong. And because you've been through enough." I nodded again, slow. "Yeah." Then I said the thing that surprised him. "Tell me exactly what you saw." Tom blinked. "What?" "I'm done guessing," I told him. "If they're building a story about me, I'm building one about them. And mine's gonna be real." Tom's face hardened in a way I recognized. Loyalty turning into purpose. He pulled his phone out, set it on the table and started talking. And as he did, my confusion turned into something sharp. Not rage. Clarity. I didn't sleep. Not because my thoughts were loud. Because they were organized. Tom's words kept playing in clean loops. A few weeks ago, outside the patio place, close enough it wasn't a misunderstanding. He'd given me details, not drama. Enough to turn my gut into a map. Around 11:40 p.m., I drove back toward the house. I didn't pull into the driveway. I rolled past, turned at the corner, and parked down the street where the porch light couldn't reach me. My truck ticked softly as it cooled. The street was quiet except for a distant dog barking once and stopping like it got corrected. I watched my own house the way I'd watch a job site after hours, looking for what shouldn't be there. The front curtains were half drawn. Living room light on. No silhouettes. No movement. Then my eyes settled on the driveway. Brian's car. A slick luxury thing that looked wrong in front of my garage. Parked where my girls played basketball on weekends. Where I'd taught them to dribble and shoot. Where chalk lines still ghosted the concrete. Seeing it there did something arguments couldn't. It wasn't just proof he'd been around. It was him practicing ownership. Like the house was already his and my family was already adjusted to his presence. Like my absence was a feature, not a problem. I sat there with both hands on the steering wheel, breathing slow. I could have stormed in. Could have made it loud. I could have yanked the door open and asked questions that would be turned into accusations by morning. But that would have been their story. He's unstable. He's angry. He's scary. We're protecting the girls. I stared at that car and understood the real game. They didn't just want me out. They wanted me wrong on the way out. So I didn't move. I watched the house for another 20 minutes. No one came outside. No door opened. The driveway stayed still like a photograph that insulted me. And in the dark, I made a decision that felt cold and clean. Tomorrow, I'm going to learn the whole truth. Not from their mouths. Not from some staged tribunal. From what they left behind. From what they couldn't help doing when they thought I was beaten. I put the truck in drive and pulled away without headlights for the first few yards. Rolling silent until I hit the corner. I didn't feel calm. I felt focused. Because when someone tries to erase you from your own life, you don't beg for your spot back. You document the theft. Morning came gray and thin. I waited until I knew the house would be empty. School drop-off, errands, whatever routine they thought belonged to them. I parked a block away and walked in like I still had a right to turn my own key. Because I did. The air inside smelled like lemon cleaner and old coffee. Quiet. No Tuesday noise. Just that hollow calm that makes a house feel like it's holding its breath. I went straight to the bedroom. Not sneaking. Not rushing. Focused like checking a job site after a beam failure. You don't panic. You assess. Amanda's laptop was on the dresser. Open. Screen still glowing like she'd stepped away for a second and forgot the world had consequences. No password prompt. No lock screen. Just her inbox and a message thread pinned to the top. Brian. I stared at his name for one beat, then sat down and read. It wasn't one message. It was weeks. A timeline laid out in casual lines, meetups, excuses, coordinated stories. The kind of planning that doesn't happen by accident. And then it got worse. Because it wasn't just about them. It was about me. They talked about keeping the girls aligned. About framing my reactions. About using my mother as a stabilizing voice. About painting me as the problem until it became the only story anyone remembered. No graphic details. None needed. The tone told me everything. Cold, strategic, almost bored. Like my marriage was a project and I was the obstacle they were removing. I scrolled, slower now, feeling my heartbeat stay steady while something deeper in me hardened. There it was in plain language, references to that living room tribunal like it was a successful first step. Notes about what to say next time, what buttons to push, how to get Sophie to repeat lines like not in charge anymore so it sounded like it came from her, not from Amanda. They weren't betraying me. They were replacing me. I took photos with my phone. Timestamped. Screen after screen. Then I forwarded what mattered to an email account Amanda didn't control. The way you back up blueprints before someone loses them. When I closed the laptop, my hands didn't shake. My stomach dropped, yes. But my mind was clear. If they were writing my exit plan while I paid the mortgage, then fine. I'd write the ending myself. I didn't take the laptop. I didn't wreck anything. I didn't pace around the bedroom like a man losing his mind. I did what I do when something goes wrong on a job. I documented. I printed the parts that mattered, names, dates, plans. Not every line. Just enough that nobody could call it misunderstanding without lying on purpose. I forwarded copies to myself and saved backups, because I'd learned a long time ago that people who betray you don't suddenly get honest when cornered. They get slippery. Then I sat at the kitchen table and waited. The house stayed quiet until the front door opened and closed. Footsteps. A bag set down. Keys tossed into the bowl like this was still normal life. Amanda walked in with her practiced calm. Hair up, coat half off, face already arranged for whatever role she thought she needed today. She stopped when she saw me, not surprised I was home, surprised I was still here. Her eyes dropped to the papers spread in front of me. What are those? I took a slow sip of coffee. Sit down. She didn't like the words coming from me. I saw it in the way her mouth tightened before she moved. She slid into the chair across from me like she was entering a negotiation, not a marriage. Amanda glanced at the top page. Her pupils tightened. A crack, small, quick. Then she tried to plaster calm back over it. You went through my laptop? She said, like that was the crime. I read the plan you and Brian wrote about pushing me out. I answered. Call it whatever makes you sleep. She leaned back, crossing her arms. You're paranoid. You've been spiraling for weeks and… I held up one page, just enough for her to see her own words staring back at her. Save it. Her eyes flicked over the lines. I watched her throat move when she swallowed. You don't know what you're reading, she said, quieter now. I know you coached my daughters, I replied. I know you used my mother as cover. I know Brian's been parking in my driveway like he owns it. And I know you're not shocked I found this. Just angry I did. Amanda's mouth opened, then closed. Her confidence kept slipping like a tire on wet concrete. I kept my voice level. Whose idea was the family meeting? Silence. Amanda. I didn't raise my tone. I sharpened it. Whose idea? Her eyes darted away for half a second, and that half second answered me better than any confession. I nodded once. How long have you been telling the girls I'm the problem? She stared at the tabletop like it had the words she wanted. Her fingers pressed into her forearm, hard. I waited. No pressure. Just time. Because when a liar runs out of safe exits, they either explode or fold. She didn't fold. She didn't explode. She went quiet, and that quiet was her admission. I set the papers down and leaned forward a little, not threatening, not pleading, just a present. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Brian is out of my house, effective today. Amanda's eyes flashed. You can't just… Yes. I cut in, calm as a measuring tape. I can. This is my home. He's not welcome here. Her jaw worked. The girls are going to hear the truth, I said. Not your version, not his version. The truth. Amanda's composure cracked again, deeper this time. Her voice came out sharper. You're trying to control everyone. I let that sit for a beat, then smiled once. No warmth in it. No, I said. I'm done letting you. Her eyes went hard. So what, you're going to ruin your own family over emails? I stood up slowly, picked up the stack, and tapped it into a neat pile like I was straightening lumber. You already tried to ruin it, I told her. I'm just not going to be replaced quietly. I turned and walked out of the kitchen before she could find a new angle. Because boundaries don't require permission. And I'd just drawn the first one in ink. For the next week, I acted normal. Not soft. Not friendly. Just steady. I came home at the same time. Ate dinner. Did dishes when it was my turn like I always had. Asked the girls about school without pushing. Helped when they let me, backed off when they didn't. I didn't chase their eyes or beg for warmth. I gave them space to remember who I was without Amanda narrating over me. Amanda watched me like she was waiting for the slip. Every calm good night from me made her shoulders tighten. She wanted me hot. She wanted me to be reckless. She wanted evidence. I gave her none. Instead, I kept notes. Not dramatic. Not obsessive. Clean. Dates, times, license plates. Who arrived, who left, what days Brian's car showed up, how long it stayed. I documented like a contractor documenting delays and defects, because if you don't write it down, someone else will rewrite it. Brian started appearing like clockwork. Tuesday, 6:12 p.m. Thursday, 7:05 p.m. Saturday afternoon. Just stopping by. Like he didn't feel the word by applying to my home anymore. He didn't knock like a guest. He walked in like family. My mother, Carol, played her part too. Always in the same seat, always a little too quick to correct me in front of the girls. always ready with a sigh that said here we go even when nothing was happening. And the girls were careful around me at first, like they'd been told I was a risk. But kids aren't blind. They notice who stays consistent and who performs. Sophie lingered one night after dinner, pretending to look for her charger while watching me rinse plates. Emma asked me a simple math question like it hadn't been decided that I was no longer useful. Small moments, not forgiveness, not loyalty, cracks in the script. By the end of that week, I had a timeline, a pattern, and something even better than an argument. Proof that this wasn't a mistake. It was a schedule. A takeover attempt dressed up as what's best for everyone. And I was done being the only man in the room who didn't come prepared. They tried it again on Sunday. Same semicircle. Same performative calm. Same bodies placed like props. But this time there was an extra chair. And in it sat Tom. His posture was stiff, eyes uneasy. Like he'd been lured into something he didn't agree to but couldn't escape without looking like the villain. He met my gaze for half a second and looked away, and I knew exactly what they were doing. They wanted my friend in the room so the story sounded credible. Amanda stood near the window like she was about to address a council. "We asked Tom here because we care," she said, voice soft, controlled, therapy speak with teeth under it. "We're concerned about your behavior." Carol nodded along like she'd rehearsed her part. "It's been unhealthy." Brian sat too comfortably on the couch, legs spread, hands clasped, wearing that mediator mask like he was the adult in the room. "Nobody's attacking you," he said. "We just want what's best for the girls." I looked at my daughters. Sophie's arms were crossed tight, like she was trying to hold herself together. Emma stared at the floor again, but her foot tapped like she wanted to run. Amanda gestured toward the empty chair. "Please sit." I didn't. I set my phone on the coffee table screen down, then took one step forward, not into the circle, but close enough that everyone had to acknowledge I was standing. "I'm going to keep this simple," I said. Amanda's mouth twitched. She hated simple because it leaves no room to spin. "You staged a meeting to tell me I'm not in charge anymore," I continued, calm and clear. "You positioned my brother as the new man of the house, and you coached my daughters to repeat it." Sophie's head snapped up. "Dad." I held a hand up, not to silence her, just to slow the room. "Sophie, I'm not blaming you. I'm naming what happened." Amanda stepped in fast. "That's not what it is," I said, still quiet, "and I have it in writing." Brian's expression tightened for the first time, that relaxed confidence finally catching a hairline crack. Carol leaned forward, voice sharp. "How dare you go through Amanda's? How dare she plan to erase me?" I replied. The air shifted. Tom's eyes flicked to Amanda, then Brian, like he was finally seeing the wiring behind the wall. Amanda tried again, voice syrupy. "This is exactly what we mean. You're escalating." "No," I said. "I'm refusing your script." Brian raised his palms. "Look, let's not." I turned my head toward him and spoke like I was addressing a trespasser on a job site. "Get out of my house," I said. The words were clean. No shouting, no profanity, just a boundary placed in concrete. Brian blinked. "Come on. Now," I said. Amanda's voice snapped. "You can't tell him." "I can." I cut in. "This is my home. You don't get to install him here like furniture." Emma finally looked at me, eyes wide. I shifted my focus to Amanda. "You're going to tell the girls the truth." She laughed once, sharp and fake. "About what?" "About the affair," I said, and let the word land. Sophie inhaled like she'd been punched. Emma's face went pale. Carol made a strangled sound. "What are you?" I didn't take my eyes off Amanda. "And you're going to stop using them as a shield." Amanda's composure tried to hold, but her cheeks flushed. Her eyes flashed toward Brian. Too quick, too telling. Tom stood up slowly, chair scraping the floor. "Amanda," he said, voice rough. "Is that true?" Amanda's head snapped toward him. "Tom, this is none of. It is as if you dragged me in here to help you paint him as crazy," Tom replied. He looked at me, then back at her. "You told me he was spiraling. You didn't tell me you were sleeping with his brother." The room went dead quiet. Brian stood up fast. "This is ridiculous." I pointed at the front door. "Out." He hesitated just a second too long, then grabbed his coat like he'd always planned to leave on his terms. Carol looked stunned, smaller now, eyes darting between us like she couldn't find the version of reality she'd memorized. I turned to her last. "Mom," I said, voice steady. "You need to decide if you're my mother or their cover." Carol's lips parted. No words came. Not yet. But the question was in the room, and it wasn't going anywhere. Brian walked out first, face tight, jaw clenched. Amanda stood frozen, caught between image and truth. My daughters stared at me like they were seeing a man they didn't recognize. Not because I was angry, because I wasn't, and that's what they couldn't spin. Once the second tribunal collapsed, the house got quieter, but the numbers got louder. I started prepping for divorce the way I prepare for an audit on a big job. Assume something's missing until proven otherwise. At first it was small. A transfer I didn't recognize. A credit balance that didn't match the rhythm of our bills. A savings account lighter than it should have been, like someone had been taking scoops instead of chunks. Quiet enough you don't notice unless you're looking for it. Then I looked for it. I pulled statements, checked dates, built a simple timeline beside the one I'd been keeping on Brian's visits. Patterns don't just live in driveways. They live in withdrawals, too. There were payments to accounts I'd never authorized. Charges that didn't fit our life. Cash pulls that felt like someone didn't want a record of what they bought. And the deeper I dug, the clearer it got. Brian didn't just cross a moral line. He crossed a legal one. I sat in Ms. Harper's office 2 days later. Clean desk, sharp eyes, no patience for excuses. I handed her a folder with printed statements, screenshots, and my notes. She didn't react like a therapist. She reacted like a professional who recognizes a problem with teeth. She flipped pages, marked dates, and tapped one transfer with her pen. "This isn't normal household spending," she said. "No," I answered. "It's a siphon." She looked up. "Do you have access to all accounts?" "Enough," I said. "And I have backups." Ms. Harper nodded once like I'd passed the first test. "Then we move carefully. You don't confront them about money again. You let the process do the talking." When I got home, Amanda was waiting in the kitchen with that same practiced calm, until she saw the folder in my hand. "What is that?" she asked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. "Consequences," I said, and for the first time, her confidence didn't crack. It buckled. Founders Day in our town is simple. Flags on Main Street, food trucks, kids with painted faces, and a stage where local leaders get to shake hands and pretend they're stitched into the community. Brian loved it. He'd taken on a visible role, committees, speeches, smiling for photos. The kind of polish that makes people assume your character is as clean as your shirt. I didn't show up angry. I showed up prepared. Ms. Harper had already filed what needed filing. I had copies of what mattered, packaged the right way, and delivered to the right people, quietly, legally, and without drama. Not a scene. A record. When Brian stepped up to the mic, he did his usual. Confident, relaxed, like he belonged there. Amanda hovered off to the side, trying to look supportive while her eyes scanned for threats. Then the threat turned into a question. One of the board members, an older guy who'd known our family for years, walked up, leaned in, and spoke low. Brian's smile didn't drop right away, twitched first. Then it failed. He looked out over the crowd like he was searching for an exit that didn't exist. He didn't finish his remarks. He handed the mic off too fast and stepped down like the stage had grown hot under his feet. Within minutes, his phone was glued to his ear and his car was gone. Amanda followed the same pattern, panic dressed as dignity. By that evening, she was packing and calling family out of state like she'd suddenly remembered she had somewhere else to be. My mother came by 2 days later. No lecture, no authority, just a smaller version of herself standing on my porch. "I was wrong," she said. "I didn't punish her. I didn't soothe her. I just nodded." "Yeah." The girls didn't know where to put their feelings at first. Sophie stayed angry. Emma stayed quiet. But they started watching me again, not for explosions, but for consistency. So I stayed. Counseling, new routines, school events I used to miss, dinners where my phone stayed face down, small repairs around the house that reminded them I wasn't leaving, even when it would have been easier to disappear into work. I learned something I should have learned sooner. Providing isn't a substitute for being present. And from that point on, I stopped letting life happen around me. I showed up while it was happening.
Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters. And trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.